and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. And it's game week, people. That's right. Off season's over. Bring it on. It's week one. The Oklahoma Sooners host the UTEP Miners in the 128th. The debut of Team 128, as Brent Venables would say. I'm your host, Bobby Howard. With me today, as always, back for another season of Sooner football. Jamison, Maxwell, and Ty Lee. We have a full setup. We're pumped. And guys, I gotta say, after this long off season, how thrilled are y'all to see the Sooners finally snap the ball this Saturday at 2:30? Jamison?
2:30. I honestly, golden time slot, so that makes it even better. And honestly, there's just so much excitement for a regular old OU season where you kind of know what's going on going into it. Obviously, plenty of excitement, but with a new era with Brent Venables, new quarterback, pretty much new team for the most part, it's so much excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. It's thrilling. It feels different than last year's did. Ty, are you excited? How are you feeling right now?
I'm extremely excited. I'm extremely optimistic about this team. I'm extremely optimistic about the potential ceiling for this team. And I don't know, it's a weird feeling. We've had so much turmoil and so much drama that has surrounded the culmination of the end of last season with this OU team. And I really feel like I'm coming into this season feeling a lot better than I thought that I would have early December last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's this weird sense of optimism going on. But I'm all in on it. You know, I like you said, I don't think we would have been this optimistic, last year when, we were having our podcast when Lincoln left, and then hell, even when Venables, came to OU, when we were all watching his plane land, I don't think we, thought we would be here, but here we are. And I think that's really exciting. I mean, it's just absolutely exciting. So we're going to start this off. Jamison, UTEP, like we haven't seen them in a while, in terms of like the last time OU played them, is 2017 when, Baker Mayfield made his run. But we saw him a little bit in week one. Really anything to talk about there? What did we see out of them, in that kind of week zero beatdown?
Yeah, we want to do most of our previews in recaps on Sunday night. So if y'all are listening right now, just be ready for those. But since UTEP played on Saturday, we wanted a little bit more time to kind of get that prep for this game. And honestly, losing to 18 versus North Texas wasn't the most optimistic thing for the UTEP football team. But just looking at it, I think Gavin Hardison, their quarterback, showed a couple of good things, especially in the first half. There was a point in that first quarter, even though there were no points, I thought this UTEP team kind of looked like they were controlling the game. And he has some tools. So that's something to watch. They have a decent quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. Ty, do you see anything out of UTEP last week?
Yeah, they put up 400 yards of offense, so that's always a decent metric. It was against UNT. Probably the biggest thing that I was looking at them was on the defensive side. They let UNT run them off the field and put up 399, so we'll say 400 yards of offense, and they let a 30-year-old college quarterback score 3 touchdowns on them. So those were my big takeaways from a couple days ago.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's kind of the thing about UTEP. They had a really good first half, and then, that second half, they really just kind of went off the rails, and, that, like you said, that 30-year-old guy got pretty hot for North Texas there for a while. So, you can attribute it to the rain delay, whatever. I think ultimately UTEP just isn't all that great. We'll see a little bit on the weekend spread, coming out later this week, that the line has actually shifted in UTEP's favor. So the Whales are laying some bricks on the Miners there. So that should be interesting. But ultimately, this is a game that kind of comes down to OU. I think that's the case with a lot of, that's kind of the mindset of this Brent Venables team. Kind of mentioned it today in the press conference that you kind of control what you can control. And ultimately, this is going to come down to the Sooners being, being up to it, being able to execute. And let's kind of get into that. So last year, season opener against Tulane, we thought it was going to be a blowout. very much was not. Very scary up until the end. Jamison, what are you looking out for the Sooners here to kind of not give us all a heart attack and almost lose to UTEP? What's going to be different? What do you think has to be different?
It's accountability and effort. We saw a lot last season that it seems like there wasn't an accountability and almost like an effort put forth every single game. And from what we heard about the practices and the weight training from Lincoln Riley's program, it seems like a lot of things just went to the wayside. And that culture is completely shifted now with Schmitty in charge and Venables, who's an old style kind of guy. Hopefully what we've been hearing from the offseason about, getting their weight up and you can't be late no matter what. We're not going to have any excuses on this football field is going to make it where these guys are going to show up every single game. It doesn't matter if it's UTEP or Tulane. They're going to go out and give their best. That's the only answer to this question. And obviously, we cannot make an assumption after this game. Say if there is a couple of falters here and there, you also have to fall back. This is a new scheme, and there's going to be some things that might not be perfect, but you'll be able to tell effort. And even though, some games might be a little bit off here and there, you can tell if everyone's giving their 100%. And that's the biggest thing I'll be watching during this game.
Ty, your thoughts?
I think Jamison brought up some really good points. It's all about, like Brent Venables says, controlling what you can control. And when you're looking at the game of college football, it's not set piece orchestrated. You're facing a thinking opponent that is able to react and counter the things that you're doing. Obviously, the ability to do that is dependent on the specific team and a whole other host of variables, but it's not something that you can go out there and control what the other side is doing. You can only control what you're doing. So I'm expecting to see, I think this is a weird metric, but I think it really shows that established culture and that established discipline and buy-in. I think, and I haven't heard anyone say this because it's kind of a weird one, like who really cares? I think we're going to be averaging much noticeably fewer penalties throughout the season with this new culture and staff. I'll make that call right now. That's nothing to back it up. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of troubles at the start of the season, but I think by the end of the season, we're going to look back and see a notably more disciplined on the field performance team. And I think that's going to be indicative of a buy-in into this culture. So to bring it back to your original question, Bobby, about what is one little thing that we can look at? Obviously, this is way down the road, but I think one thing that we could look at right away, because the win-loss record in year one of a coaching staff and with a lot of transfers and everything else, that can vary. But when we're at the end of the season, looking back, going, hey, did we win this season or did we lose this season in terms of building where we want to go? I think that penalty metric is going to be a sneaky good one to look at.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. Setting that standard has been the thing. Brent Venables has been, preaching this entire offseason. And it would feel like something would be wrong if they showed up flat, if they showed up without that effort, because, that's one thing you can't, like you said, that's one thing you can control. Going as hard as you can, going 100%, not taking plays off, not taking your foot off the gas for an opponent that you feel is inferior, which is something OU unfortunately did a lot under the Lincoln Riley era. And I don't know. I don't see that happening this time out. I don't think UTEP is as bad as they've been in the past, regardless of, UNT going out and clobbering them last week. But I don't know.
A couple days ago.
Yeah, time has been moving quick, folks. But
yeah. Hey, yeah. I think another thing on Ty's comment about the penalties. No Tyrese Robinson this year. So there's something going for us. Honestly, less penalties. Maybe Wanya Morris will be getting better, breaks off the line because Tyrese Robinson was a little bit slow and those little tiny arms got him a lot of holding calls. But I'll be looking at Chris Murray too, that right side of the line. I got my eyes on you for penalties this year.
There you go. So, I feel like the season opener is always indicative of, this obviously the start of a new year, and it's hard because you don't have tape to look at, you don't have a team that you can go back and analyze and see how they can change, look forward, so let's kind of take some time and really think about what do we want to see out of this season? What do we want to see out of OU year one under Brent Venables? So Jamison, game one kind of is weirdly like spring game, kind of like the first day of school. What do you want to see out of the Sooners on Saturday?
On Saturday versus the season, I have two different answers. So on Saturday, I think that we should be able to control the line of scrimmage. I think that should be a given. If we're not, that's honestly a problem. Last year versus Tulane might be an anomaly because Jeffrey Johnson was pretty damn good for them in Tulane. But we should be able to control the line of scrimmage just based on sheer size and skill. I'm more so looking at the guys like the wide receiver group is probably what I'm looking at in terms of other than effort for this Saturday. I want to see, is there any guys lower than the Marvin Mims and the Theo Weiss are going to break out and show that they could be a contributor on this team? I'm talking about Jalil Farouk, even though he's the number one on the depth chart, one of the outside wide receivers. I want to see if he can come in and be a wide receiver one. I want to see, is Jaden Gibson hype for real? We saw a little bit in the spring game, and we've heard plenty from the practice reports. Is this guy going to actually come out and show out in his first game as a true freshman? I think there's so much fun to be had at that wide receiver position. And with a quarterback like Dylan Gabriel, hopefully he'll be able to set him up for success.
Ty, what are you looking out for on Saturday?
Yeah, I feel like I have a sneaky suspicion that this is sort of the question that you just asked us a few minutes ago, and maybe you didn't like the answers, so the question got rephrased a little bit. But
we'll say something different.
So
it doesn't matter. It's all talking points, baby.
Yeah, so I'll keep it focused on Saturday, kind of like Jamison did, and I feel like he brought up some really good points. The line is going to be the big one that I'm looking at. On the offensive side, I don't think we're going to have too much trouble or too much tested. So again, penalties and just how coherent and well-formed they look. But on the defensive side, UTEP was only able to rush for about 3.5 yards per carry against UNT, putting up about 100 yards. So on 30 attempts. So maybe a little bit more than 3.5. But that should be a running attack that we're going to face that is not going to be too difficult, that we shouldn't see any mistakes there. So I'm really looking forward to the defensive line and their performance. I'm not too worried about the offensive depth when it comes to passing and everything else, just because we're so early in the season. And I really feel like a lot of what we throw at UNT is going to stick in terms of the passing offense. Just looking at, again, their last week performance against UTEP. If UTEP was, or if UNT was able to do it successfully, I doubt that we're really going to have any issues. So really, to put it into one sentence, the one thing that I'm looking for most on Saturday is the one thing I'm looking forward to not seeing. Well, I really fumbled that. The one thing I'm looking forward to the most is to not see this. I gotta scrunch it down. I'm putting your arms up, confused, looking at the sideline. We constantly saw that under the Lincoln Riley era on the offense and the defense. People just waiting. Some of it is how we called stuff, but that confused look of a couple people don't know what's going on. I want everyone to know what's going on. If I see OU go out there, no matter how we perform against the spread or whatever else, everyone looks like they know what they're doing. They're being disciplined. They're not making silly mistakes. I'm not at all worried about how their fundamentals and play calling and everything else is going to go, as long as everyone's disciplined and knows what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And, Jimmy Satterfield in the YouTube comments, all the way in there with you, he's expecting to see a more disciplined and better tackling team. And I think the fundamentals on defense are going to be absolutely better. Just in terms of coaching staff, I feel like, naturally a bit better as it seems. And I think that's something that you should expect, just over the offseason. Those are the things you can control. Those are the things that are easy. And, frankly, obviously, Venables doesn't have his defense in yet. He doesn't have his 5-star, elite, type of guys yet. But I don't care if you're a 5-star, if you're a 4-star, if you're whoever, you can practice the fundamentals and you can still be good at those. You can, and that's something that I feel like OU's really slipped on in the past. So I think he and you are very spot on there. And speaking of which, we are live on YouTube for those of you listening a day later on podcasts. But if you're listening live, we have a solid audience here. Feel free to ask us questions. We'll make sure to address them at least by the end of the show for sure. But we always like hearing from y'all for sure. Shout out to Billy Shields and IB Sooner as well, and then our guy Michael Whitman, of course. So. Yeah.
I want to say one more thing about that tackling comment, Bobby, because I think that's a really, really big thing, because that goes along with effort too. Obviously, there's good tacklers out there, and I think form and coaching goes a lot into it as well. But effort is a big thing. You see a lot of times where people take the wrong angle and they're not running 100% and they miss the tackle, and especially in the defensive backs. So that's one thing. But also, I really want to look on the defensive side of the ball. I talked about the wide receiving group for this game. I think a guy that on the defense side of the ball, I'm going to be having my eyes lasered on is David Ugwebu at the middle linebacker. Winning that Mike job was a big deal because that was I feel like kind of a hard competition to win. Danny Stutzman, even though he's getting the starter at will, I'm sure that one day he'll want to be the Mike. And also Deshaun White, he gets moved over to Cheetah, but Deshaun White's an inside linebacker too. I think David Ugwebu's been showing some things good in camp. And even though in my past episodes, I've been a little bit, critical of this guy might get a little bit burned in coverage. If he can go out and show some things at the beginning of the season, I'd be willing to shut up and say I was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And that's something we actually haven't addressed yet is the depth chart came out on Monday. But I'm with you. I think there are a lot of guys out there, who, it's time to kind of show out. So I will say, where did all the ORs go? I feel like they must have transferred to USC. There are much less ORs on the roster this year.
Yeah, doesn't it feel really nice? Or Austin just doesn't even have anything. So we can be very, very happy to have what we have now. Man, what a crap shit show is going on in Austin. I don't want to go down that trail, but yeah, let's talk about the depth chart for sure. Ty, I want your thoughts because the first thing that I saw whenever I looked at the depth chart, I already know. Oh my God, Ty, Marcus Major, straight up number 2 running back. Is this the season, Ty? Do you want to put your chips in again?
I mean, Jeff Lebby knows what he's talking about. He's had a ton of chances. So, as long as he apparently remembered to enroll in classes this fall, which has been a problem in the past, apparently. So he's apparently done that, which is the first step to success, is being academically eligible to even play. So, but I like what I'm hearing. As we've talked about, we're going to be seeing a lot more running from this offense, just pure up the middle, sort of wear out the defense and open up the pass for us. What a lot of people think is fundamental old school football, not pure old school. Like, I'm not talking take it back to pre-World War II, but just the sort of the football that I think all of us are mid to late 20s here in our listeners. What you learned growing up playing football at whatever level or watching football is you run until you open up the pass and then you pass until they make you run again type thing. And when we're going to be seeing a lot more runs and relying less on big, flashy, because we almost did the inverse where a lot of Lincoln Riley offense stuff was, oh, wow, this looks like we could have a big run, which is obviously still a thing. Audibles and whatever else are still a thing. But when you're just looking at just reliable carries, maybe the metric that Levy's looking at when it comes to my man Marcus Major is maybe he just has really improved ball security nowadays. That could be it. Because if you're just sending a guy through a gap and that's just his job to grind out those 2 or 3 yards sometimes and load management with Eric Gray and everything else, maybe he just has really good ball security. There's a lot that we can't read into as we're still in week 0 state when it comes to OU. So I'm super happy. It was, a call that I made a couple of years ago. It would be amazing if it came to fruition, but I don't know. I feel like people are almost reading too much into it is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't, and I'm not trying to discount his performance. I haven't seen his practice performance, but it doesn't mean that he's, the greatest thing. It's just, he might be the best at a certain thing that we're looking for to fit into a little piece into our offense. Just because he's number 2 on the depth chart doesn't mean that he's the number 2 He could fundamentally be not the number 2 guy, but I think if he just has notably better ball security than everyone else, that would be a pretty firm number 2 for me, especially when you have Eric Gray, who's very good all around, as your number 1.
Well, and not only that, but in college football or in football in general, the days of the bell cow back are over. You don't really have one guy who's going to grind it out the entire game. So having a guy like Marcus Major be definitively 2, he's going to get some major burn. No pun intended. He's going to get significant burn.
I knew it was coming.
I did not. I swear to God. I didn't mean it. He's going to get significant burn, and I think that's really exciting. For sure. So
I think another thing that we failed not to talk about this Marcus Major thing is I think there were a lot of comments about him having like the best 6 or 8 weeks of practice of his life and really showing out and earning this number 2. But Javonte Barnes has been in and out of practice, being hurt. And from what we saw in spring ball and then in summer, they're really excited about this guy. And now he's healthy and he's able to go. But being in and out of the lineup in practice and a guy who's going out every single day, giving you his best and being really solid and giving you his best 8 weeks, it's hard to keep that spot away from an upperclassman to a true freshman. I wouldn't be surprised, though, that down the line we see more Javonte Barnes and maybe a hair of Gavin Sawchuk, even though he was left off the depth chart to Tawi Walker. I think that Javonte Barnes will end up as the number 2 because, man, he is just so skillful. And in that spring game, it seemed like there was no way that's a true freshman running the ball.
Yeah. I mean, he was absolutely a highlight of that spring game for sure.
I will say real quick, before we move on from Major, another important thing, just reading into maybe he's just a certain tool. He is at least 10 pounds heavier than Eric Gray, and he is 20 and 40 pounds heavier than the next 2 guys who are both freshmen. So again, it's the only other options are freshmen, and then he is significantly heavier than both of them. That could be a factor too, and just how we're planning on using them, because they're all about the same height. So he's our biggest dude running back wise, which again, maybe that's I'm sort of circular reasoning my own justification here. But if he has really good ball security and he's 40 pounds heavier than the other dude that maybe runs a little bit better, then that's certainly going to be the guy that I'm looking at in terms of maybe I'm going to put him out there and take some of that load and run up the middle a little bit more and give Eric Gray some rest.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I think his size is definitely something that helps. Just having a different guy change of pace back is big time. But yeah. So also, what I think for me the biggest takeaway, and I know we've already made the or jokes earlier, but every single player on offense, they named a definitive starter for every single position, which I thought was interesting. Any surprises for you, Jamison, looking at the starting lineup for the offense?
Yeah, in terms of offense, no. The offensive line was really set in stone. The way they put Marvin Mims at slot makes sense, honestly, but I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of moves all over the field in terms of outside wide receiver and slot, because putting him at the slot really makes it very clear it's Theo Weiss and Jalil Farouk on the outside. But if you were to put, Drake Stoops as the starter at the slot, I'd be curious to see who is higher, Farouk or Theo Weiss. That's kind of really reading too much into it. But in terms of starters, it seems about right. And the same is on defense as well, Bobby. We've gotten so much intel about who these players, like how these players have been doing. There's not too many surprises. I think the biggest thing, I guess, on the defense, to be a surprise, quote unquote, is Jaden Davis winning the job. That was probably the biggest question mark, I thought, in terms of a position battle. I thought DJ Graham might win it, but it seems like Jaden Davis has taken that job, and DJ Graham being the backup to Woody Washington.
Yeah, and Jaden Davis, that question came up a lot during the press conference, it seemed. They're just like, well, who else did you expect? But yeah, no, I think if there was a surprise looking at that depth chart, that's one to circle. Obviously, you don't want to look too much into oars, but I thought Key Lawrence or Justin Royals was interesting at the free safety position. So I don't know. I think it's very interesting though. And
let me comment on that, Bobby, before you move on, because I think that is almost kind of I think Justin Royals will be playing nickelback a lot. but we didn't have Nickelback on the depth chart because we decided to put Cheetah instead. So I think whenever we're playing 5 DB sets, we'll see a lot more Justin Broyles and Key Lawrence on the field at the same time. But they'll be moving them around. I think Key Lawrence is a huge leader on this team, and I don't think there's any worry about him not being the starter on day one.
There you go. Ty, your thoughts on any surprises or any standouts on the depth chart for you other than Marcus Major?
No, not really. It sort of speaks to how much we knew about this roster coming in. The fact that the first thing we jumped to immediately is the biggest surprise was who the second string running back was going to be. But I think one of the things that jumps out to me is, again, the depth chart is not a look at every different setup. Obviously, some things aren't going to change. Like quarterback is not going to change. Center's not going to change by formation. But the receivers, just looking at it, I constantly every time I pull it up, I am struck by the depth that we have there. It's probably our deepest position, and it's just really exciting because we have a ton of experience. A junior and 2 seniors are the main guys, but a ton of big names out there looking to prove themselves as well. We're going to have so much opportunity to plug people in there and employ people in interesting ways that maybe go with or against their strengths. Well, hopefully not against their strengths, but probably the biggest thing that jumps out to me, and this was, again, sort of a niche thing, but it was something that we had discussed earlier in the offseason, and that was questioning who was going to be handling returns. Because as we know, there's sort of 2 schools of thought in college football currently. There's the I will have my stars doing it idea, where you have your best receiver, best running backs out there as your returners, or sometimes, and this is sort of what we started to see towards the end of the Lincoln Riley era at OU, was we'll have our second string guys or maybe our third string guys, and we'll give that an opportunity for people to get on the field reps and maybe show us some stuff as long as they have good hands. Or you have the pretty niche in the college level, but dedicated returners are actually really, really rare in college. Obviously, that's not a spot on the roster, but we have, at least in terms of the roster that we've released, committed to a pretty firm Mims and Gray being the 2 main guys. If you look at they're inverse of each other. Punt return is listed as Mims, and then primary kick return is listed as Gray, but then second punt return is listed as Gray, and then second kick return is listed as Mims. So obviously we're sticking with the not worried about load management on that handful of plays a game. We're going to put our stars out there, and hopefully they can create some stuff.
Am I seeing this differently than you?
bad-
I see kickoff return as Billy Bowman or Marcus Major or Jalil Farouk, and then punt return Marvin Mims or Eric Gray or LV Bunkley Shelton.
Okay, that's
How
what I'm
about
seeing.
bad?
That's what I'm seeing as well on the depth that they tweeted out. So,
But I still think that kind of sits up with your trend, Ty. I think that's a point to be made.
Oh my goodness, bad source. Bad source.
Bad source, but your
Okay,
friend
well,
was right.
So throw out everything that I said up until announcing who was doing it. All
Marvin
the preface
Mims
to that.
as a punt
There are
returner
different schools of
makes sense.
thoughts. We've done a different school of thought, I guess. I had pulled up, I guess, I had copied into my notes someone that did like a predicted one, like 12 hours before the official one was released. So I was just looking for a special teams one though. So
it's all good.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, but no, kick return with Bowman or Marcus Major. Well, obviously you have to have more than one. So Bowman and Major or Farouk back there, some combination. I think that's interesting, especially potentially like, the idea of Marcus Major getting, returning a ball and then going straight down with all that momentum.
He did a little bit of it the past couple years, I believe, too. Like this is like him and Bowman have experience doing this. Jalil Farouk, I don't remember him being too much of a returner. I might be wrong. And Mims, honestly, I think is the most prototype punt returner. He's got very for sure hands, and you're not as scared as much about a muff. Punt return is a lot more difficult in college comparative to the pros. Pros, you got guys who are kicking 60-yard punts, and you're catching them, and you got a little bit more room to wiggle with. In the world of college, not every single team that you face is going to have a guy that can punt it 50 yards. And a lot of these are going to be fair catches. So having your most for sure hands guy back there is the smartest move. And Marvin Mims is obviously the answer there.
Yeah, and a lot of people really dogged on Lincoln for the amount of fair catches we did. But, honestly, I think, hands and being conservative in that standpoint might not
That was
be
more
the
of a
worst
kickoff thing, though.
Yeah, the complaints about the kickoffs for sure I get, because, why not give it let her rip, but, punt returns, I think hands are the move there. It's been that way like since before Lincoln. I feel like Stoops really kind of had that towards the end of his tenure. We never saw like Sterling Shepard return anything, for example. So I think that's just kind of, like you said, kind of a common thing. I wouldn't be too worried about it, and not nothing to be too upset about if you do see a lot of fair catches.
I mean, it's just your number one wide receiver being back there. It's not like Marvin Mims, some stick in the mud. He won't be able to return a punt. He just got the best hands, and he's got some shift to him. He's got some speed. I'm not predicting any kind of like punt return touchdowns this year, but it's someone I feel confident back there. I think moving on, guys, from this depth chart, I think one last thing I want to talk about on this podcast, we've kind of already talked about what we're expecting from Saturday. And we did a little bit about what we're expecting from this season. And also on last episode that we did on Saturday, we talked a little bit what would be like a non-disappointing season for the Sooners. I think let's just kind of bridge this to a similar question, but we'll take us in a different direction. Like, what do you expect from the Oklahoma Sooners this season? Like, put it on the line right now before the season starts. What do you think is going to happen? How is it going to end? And are we going to be happy fans at the end?
Ty, I'll let you start this one out.
Yeah, so again, I feel like we asked this question twice at the start of the podcast. And then we also did an entire episode on this a couple weeks ago.
Let's do it again. Things have changed. Yeah. Come on. Like honestly, everyone wants to hear season predictions.
Like it's to be fair, you never know who's listening for the first time either.
Yeah, we haven't asked exactly the same question, but it certainly seems like we keep re-asking did you eat all the cookies from the cookie jar in different ways, trying to get someone to admit to something. But I think realistically, I would not be happy with 2 losses, but I think a 2-loss is realistic. I think this OU team is better and will perform at the top end or overperform any realistic expectations, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to give a political answer. Really what I'm saying is, honestly don't know off the top of my head how many games we're playing. So bad podcast host, but if I knew the number of games we were playing, then I could give you an exact, whatever 2 losses works out to be. I think I could see us pretty realistically, maybe even being a 1-loss team. Undefeated is always possible. It's always feasible in the regular season if we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. But I almost would not hope for undefeated, because then I feel like we just get really set up to fail in the postseason. I think we have everything that we need to be undefeated in the Big 12. But again, that's based on assumptions about the other teams too. We don't know anything really about any of these teams. So I think a 2-loss OU team is a pretty realistic, but I could see a 1-loss OU team as well. And I will say that 1 loss is during the regular season. So that would include a win. I expect us to win the conference. That's a firm thing I can give out. I think
saying 2 losses
we can and should win the conference.
Counting the bowl game? Is that what you're saying? Because it's 13 games, including the conference championship, 12 regular season games, and they don't typically count the bowl game. So are you saying 2 regular season losses?
So I'm counting a postseason. I could see because I could see us because I think we're good enough to overperform within the Big 12, and then, like I said, get set up for failure by just the conference not being that great, if that makes sense. But there's always mistakes in college football. Yeah,
and it's a total crapshoot when it comes to postseason stuff. But no, I think you're around the right way. I think the general expectation 2 losses I think would be like that's what we kind of expect. But a 1-loss season, Big 12 champion, I would consider that to be an absolute win. It's all about building blocks. It's all about steps towards moving this team where it needs to be in terms of becoming a championship program. And Rome wasn't built in a day, and there's a lot of stuff to recover from. And at that same time, I think there's a lot of excitement, and this team is going to be a lot better than I think a lot of people who aren't really in the OU circle and aren't, pumping that hopium that we've been pumping all off season are feeling, because I really think this team could be very good, if everyone stays healthy and, people catch on a little bit quicker and that motivation's there. I don't know. I'm feeling that one loss season, like Lynn in the comments is saying, one loss season conference champ. I think that is a really good season. If they make the playoff, great. Whatever. I'm cool with it. I'm not one of those people who gets embarrassed about losing in the playoff. I think getting to the playoff is pretty solid. Now, once we get better and the expectation is to win a playoff game, then you can get a little bit more mad about it, but that's just free money to me if Brent somehow makes it year one. You won't see me complaining about that. So, but at the same time, I'm not going into this season expecting that.
Who are you worried about with your one loss then, Bobby?
Say it. We already know. You're sympathetic
to
to this team. You're a sleeper agent for this team. Just say it.
TCU?
Is that what you're worried about TCU?
No, you're not. You're not worried about TCU.
I actually think it'll be TCU. I think that kind of build up before Texas is weird. I feel like Sonny Dykes is tricky. I don't like. I get the heebie-jeebies about it. I know we've handled them every single year since 2014, but that image of Blake in my mind, rushing the field, running past Zach Sanchez's leg, it's burned into my retinas, and I will never not be afraid of that game. And for me, it's the trickiest road game because I think Iowa State's bad. I think Texas Tech's bad. I think West Virginia's bad, but TCU. They're just tricky enough. So I think the Frogs might be where we trip up. If not them, then, you can obviously see a straight up loss to Texas because, anything can happen in Red River. But in terms of a trap game, it's TCU to me. I don't see us letting up on K-State, especially with, Venables, being, a K-State alum. I don't know. I don't see that being it. I think we beat Nebraska, especially after last week.
God, I hope so. Oh my goodness.
Ty, who do you think? You said one loss with a loss in a bowl is what you were saying. Who is your one loss that you think?
To make up the two. I think one, realistically, I am most worried about. I don't want to sound. I think the most plausible one is Texas. Again, I think that they are a complete dumpster fire, but they've been a complete dumpster fire for a while, and it's always been pretty rough. We had that. Was that one year, a couple of years ago, where they had that raging comeback, and things got dicey. They beat us once during the what's his name era, the other alcoholic, the one that got fired, not the one that's there right now. But so that one's worrisome. But I think K-State probably worrisome, which I'm not too upset about either, because it's like when you play like a kid in soccer, you let them win. It means a lot to them. It doesn't really matter to you. Technically you lost, but whatever. Which is also how I feel about Bedlam. But I know if I speak ill of Oklahoma State, Bobby he'll get upset. Because he's an Oklahoma State Cowboys fan. See, he's already doing it. He's already getting upset.
Oh, man.
So, what about you, Jamison?
It's just straight up not true, but okay.
Yeah, I think we crush Oklahoma State this year. That's probably my one for sure take. I think we just beat them into the dirt. But I'm going one loss with a loss to Texas, and that's sad to say out loud, but I'm just worried about the skill positions. And, Texas, anything goes. Even the times that we play Texas with Case McCoy as the quarterback and Jackson Shipley, we could lose, even if we have a really good team. And with the team going into a big game with high-end skill players that might not be performing extremely well every single week, I just have this worry. And I guess, we're not worried about Baylor. I mean, it's tough. Baylor is a really, really good team, but I just, with them playing, it's a home game, right? We play them at home, right, Bobby?
Yeah, it's a home game.
Yeah.
Early November. I'm with you.
I think there's going to be too much hype and too much preparation in that I think Baylor's a good team. They're solid, and Dave Aranda's a hell of a coach that'll do some good scheming, but I just think we're going to show up and just play really well in the game.
Yeah. I think every time we lose to Baylor, it's always at their place. I mean, there was that one where they were just flat out better than us and they kicked our ass, and We had Mike Stoops setting his guys 10 yards back. But other than that, I don't really worry about them at Owen Field. Ty?
Yeah, Baylor with Dave Aranda is just a fundamentally good football team, which even when they are on paper worse than OU, makes them a very significant threat if you have in my opinion, a Lincoln Riley style team where there's a lot of flash in the pan and pizzazz and all sorts of, not necessarily trick plays, but trickery and all sorts of moving parts and complex stuff required to win the game. I think Baylor could even be a better team this year than they were last year. But I think when you have a fundamental team like OU is supposedly fielding, and we field a fundamentally good offense and fundamentally good players under Levy, and Venables, obviously his whole thing is just really good, fundamental, stereotypical football team. I think if you can piece together one of those, even if it's not as good on paper, it is much less threatened by a team like the threat that Baylor is going to present to us. In my opinion, I could be completely wrong. I had Baylor last in the Big 12 last year, mostly just because I forgot about them. But don't take anything I have to say on Baylor as truth. But I do think there is a bit of truth in teams being a little bit more of a threat to a team that is maybe on paper better, but relies on some more gimmicks to win versus a team that on paper isn't as good, but is fundamentally really solid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's all good points about Baylor. So let's wrap this thing up with one last question. We always like just kind of talking about the overall game day experience. Well, Memorial Stadium has had some additions concession-wise, and kind of want to ask y'all, what do you think is the biggest, best addition? We got Fletcher's Corny Dogs coming back. That's great. Got a little... But I will say, it's not the flashiest corn dog to come through. There's like this Elotes corn dog, which is really weird. Midway Deli is setting up shop. There's Boomerang Diner, which is like, that's pretty all right. And then a little Korean barbecue in a cup called Cup Bop. So, y'all, I want to ask, what is the shining star of these new additions? And if you had to choose, what would you be going to? Jamison?
I think that what Bobby's also going to say, it's Midway. It's an Oklahoma staple, a Norman staple, and you get it at the football game. Nowadays, now that we don't live down in Norman, I guess, Ty has a different story here. But since I don't live in Norman, I can't hit those spots as much as I want to. I'm only there for game days, and no shot if I'm even thinking about a Midway sandwich on a game day. So having just that chance, I know the line's going to be a little bit ridiculous, but if they're pre-making their sandwich like they do in their travel buses, that's probably the move, because I get to say I had a Midway sandwich and go to the game. And honestly, that's just two birds with one stone.
Yeah. I mean, you can't tell me a nice Vulcan sandwich, just snag one, eat it during the game at your seat. That sounds perfect to me. That is Norman. That is OU to me. Delightfully in between two slices of bread. I miss it every day. The other one's good job, whatever, nice to put, some crema on in corn on a corn dog. That's cool and all, but the real ones, no, Midway's the move. Ian, what the hell? Got Ginger's confused there. Ty, what's your move?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, so first off, there is a list. If you just Google, for everyone watching and listening, if you just Google OU new concessions and then hit news, it came up, because I wasn't tracking until Bobby brought something up here either. News 4. Oklahoma News 4 has a full list. Bobby, out of the ones you mentioned, the one that pops out to me, again, like you guys said, is Midway. But I am excited for any new options, because I understand I have a pretty niche, view on foods. I pretty much just Mexican, barbecue, and Italian food, and that's pretty much all I eat, and rice, anything with rice. But unfortunately, no big rice bowls at the OU games yet. One day. But but all the additions are good, because you never know, that could be somebody's favorite restaurant. So anything that we're adding is always a great sign. One that you didn't mention that's not technically food, because I'm not a big eating at the stadium guy either. I like to eat before and after, but one that really jumped out to me really popped out to me was Poppin' Okies popcorn. I'm a huge popcorn guy. I love popcorn. And the OU Daily has some really cool photos of that. And I'm just a fan of something like that a little bit more at the stadium. Maybe it's because more often than you guys, especially in recent years, I've viewed my games from the student section. So that's a little bit different environment. I don't know the dynamics of eating a Midway sandwich at a packed student section aren't optimal, but popcorn is, I think, great for a game. I like the mobility of it, and it doesn't involve both hands and things like that. So a lot of good options. I definitely I think the lines are going to continue to be crazy. So who knows? But yeah, Poppin' Okies popcorn jumped out to me, and I'm assuming they're local based on the name.
Yeah, no, that would be a little bit weird if they were from, I don't know, like Iowa. So, I love a good popcorn at the game. I think that's, sometimes you want to keep it simple. You don't want to go too crazy and, just, bag of popcorn, maybe a little bit of peanut action, that's that scratches that itch, that hits the spot. So, yeah. By the way, 1982 Boomer Sooner, Midway is indeed a legendary Switzer haunt. You see him there all the time. I had a conversation with him about a pastrami sandwich there once. It was really, truly wonderful, wonderful stuff. So, yeah, I probably shouldn't recommend people to go hang out there and to try to see Barry Switzer, but also you're more likely than not. Anyways.
Yeah, but just real.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say on the concessions real quick. According to News 4, we got Baked Bear, Boomerang Diner, Cup Bop, the Korean one, like we said, HTO, which is just drinks. It looks like Levy Premium, which is barbecue things. Midway Deli, like we said, Nashbird. Although I thought Nashbird was there last year.
It was
Nashville styled hot chicken, Poppin' Okies, and then a Shakes Place that's just called Shakes.
There you go.
Good on their copyright lawyers for just getting Shakes.
Locking down Shakes. Just all of it. The entire food. So, all right, folks. I think that's all we got for this week. It's game week. Let's get this thing. Next week, we'll be talking about a football game that actually happened instead of previewing one. So, I, for one, can't wait for it. I'm looking forward to the game day and super, super pumped to get this thing going. If you listen to this live on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all of you getting your comments in. If you're listening to this back on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, thank you so much. Make sure to leave a 5-star review if you can, if you want to. I think we're 5-star men. So, we will have our score predictions, our bets coming up on the weekend spread coming up soon. So make sure to stay tuned to that on your pod feed.
10 more minutes. 7:30.
Well, we're not going live with it.
Oh, what? Why not?
Because we're not going to do a double episode. We don't want to overwhelm everyone. We got to spread that out.
I don't see why it would be any negative.
You make your employees do a double.
We're
doing a double. You force your unpaid employees to do it.
We're going to take a time out and discuss it. The viewers don't need to see this. It's fine. We'll talk about it later.
Okay. All right, cut us off. Cut us off, angry workers.
The audience don't need to see mom, dad, and other dad have an argument. So
who's mom?
This has been the Scooter Pod. We hope you enjoyed listening to this. We'll see you next week for week 2 as we break down the Kent State Golden Flashes. Y'all have yourself a great, great Labor Day weekend. Great week 1. We'll see you soon. Boomer Sooner, everybody.